Hello.
Story 1. My mother brought me into this world when she was only 19 years of age, a remarkably youthful time in her life to shoulder such a significant burden of responsibility. Despite her youth, she harbored a firm determination to provide me with the best possible life. She dedicated extended hours to her work, frequently managing multiple employment roles concurrently, all to ensure that we possessed every necessity. She meticulously accumulated her savings to acquire her own dwelling, a private apartment, and a personal vehicle. She managed all her financial obligations with extreme care, never once failing to make a payment, and successfully established a secure and harmonious home environment for us. It is also pertinent to mention that both my mother's and father's extended families frequently offered their assistance whenever she required someone to supervise me during her working hours. However, there were instances when their respective schedules did not align, necessitating her search for external babysitting services. I was informed that she crafted several informative flyers and strategically placed them in various popular public locations and local coffee shops, with the hope that a wider audience would notice them and establish contact. She was delighted to receive a number of responses and ultimately extended an offer of employment to a truly wonderful young woman named Rachel. This particular narrative might appear rather straightforward to some individuals, myself included, but I am inherently a person who cherishes and seeks to understand every minute detail. Consequently, I frequently inquire about my early childhood, what I was like as a baby and young child. I yearn to hear amusing anecdotes, the particularly memorable instances, or anything that truly stood out during that period. I am uncertain why, but I simply possess a profound fondness for such specific details. To my great surprise, I later discovered that the process of searching for a suitable babysitter had been considerably more arduous and anxiety-inducing than I had ever imagined. This revelation did not come to light until I reached high school, approximately 3 years prior, during my junior academic year. Following one of my volleyball matches, my mother and I were sharing a pleasant laugh about something as we exited the school building and walked towards her car to begin our journey home. It was at that precise moment that a lady intercepted us. I had often observed this particular lady around my school premises, typically during the evening hours when the majority of people had already departed. She was recognized as the school custodian, and ordinarily, she would be engaged in the tasks of cleaning the corridors and emptying various refuse receptacles. I had not previously paid her much attention. However, on that specific night, when she halted us, I scrutinized her more closely. I became aware that she had special needs, though I intend that observation not in any negative or disrespectful manner. She was evidently brimming with excitement upon seeing me, yet I could discern a definite sense of unease in my mother when the lady placed her arm around my waist. "I know you," she exclaimed. "I used to babysit you when you were little." She added, "Just a tiny baby. I used to see you a couple of times a month. We were practically best friends." To my knowledge, I had absolutely no recognition of this woman. I did not remember her at all, and her pronouncements thoroughly bewildered me. Before I could even formulate a question, my mother swiftly guided me out the door and hastened us towards her car. She appeared visibly distressed and uttered not a single word throughout the entire drive home. I, too, refrained from asking anything, resulting in a completely silent car journey. Nevertheless, I could not cease contemplating the unsettling incident that had just transpired. Therefore, one day, I casually introduced the topic to my mother, hoping to gain a deeper understanding of what had caused her such discomfort. I could perceive that my mother was still disturbed merely by reminiscing about it, but she eventually sat me down and recounted the entire story of her quest to find a babysitter for me. The lady whom I had encountered at school that evening had contacted my mother after spotting her flyer. It transpired that they had attended the same school, which incidentally was the very same school I was attending. Furthermore, as we resided in a particularly small and rural community, this lady was aware of my mother's home address. When my mother courteously declined her offer, the lady developed a disturbing obsession with both her and me. She would call my mother daily, visit her at her workplace, and even wait outside our residence, persistently attempting to persuade her to alter her decision regarding hiring her. She also composed letters to my mother and placed them in our mailbox. The situation escalated to such a grave extent that one day, my mother awoke from a nap to discover the lady seated on the living room floor, actively playing with me while I laughed contentedly. My mother abruptly halted her narration at that point. I believe she either relocated, obtained a restraining order, or contacted the police. Perhaps all three measures were taken, but the experience profoundly terrified her, and I am certain anyone would comprehend why. We never ascertained how the lady gained entry into our house, how long she had been aware of how to enter, or for what duration she had been performing these actions. Story 2. When I was approximately 13 or 14 years old, I undertook babysitting duties for two young boys who lived in my immediate neighborhood. I had previously watched them on a few occasions, so their parents felt a considerable sense of security in entrusting them to my care. That particular night, the parents were scheduled to attend a church-related function, and consequently, they anticipated being out extremely late, until approximately 2:30 in the morning. Given the nature of the event being associated with their religious community, I voluntarily offered to babysit without expecting any compensation. I reasoned that it was my contribution, a personal way of assisting in giving back to them. The family resided within a modest apartment complex, a structure of the kind that features 2 floors and comprises 4 individual units within each distinct section. Their specific apartment was situated on the ground floor, which facilitated remarkably easy ingress and egress. The dwelling contained 2 bedrooms, positioned on opposing sides of the apartment. Upon entry, the kitchen was located directly to the left, encompassing a small dining area where we could comfortably sit and consume snacks. The living room was positioned to the right, featuring a sliding glass door that led out to a compact patio where the children enjoyed playing during the daylight hours. It was approaching 1:30 in the morning, and I was aware that the parents would be returning home soon. The children had finally succumbed to sleep after a good deal of pleading and my reading them 3 bedtime stories. I had successfully completed my homework assignments, and since their residence lacked cable television, they possessed only a limited selection of DVDs and VHS tapes for entertainment. From this meager collection, I chose the motion picture Land Before Time to help occupy the remaining time. I was thoroughly exhausted and had already drifted off to sleep momentarily on a few occasions. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard a distinct knock at the front door. I knew the parents possessed their own key, so I remained perfectly still and quiet in the dark, with the television screen casting only a dim, ambient light around the room. The knocking persisted, which began to instill a considerable degree of unease within me. The lateness of the hour combined with the pervasive silence throughout the apartment produced a strange and unsettling sensation. Being somewhat predisposed to paranoia, likely due to all the horror stories I had previously watched and read, I decided to grab the baseball bat that was conveniently lying next to the couch, purely as a precautionary measure. Then, something occurred that I am certain I will never forget. I heard a small, hushed voice, almost resembling that of a young woman's, softly utter, "Oh dear, that won't help you." My heart instantly stopped beating, and a chilling sensation traversed my entire spine. I quickly recalled that I had neglected to close the blinds on the patio door. My eyes slowly gravitated towards the door, and there, standing outside on the patio, I clearly discerned a figure staring directly inside. The individual's precise features were difficult to make out, but I could clearly tell they were exceptionally short in stature and remarkably wide in build. I let out a piercing scream and dashed into the children's bedroom, slamming the door forcefully behind me. Thankfully, they remained sound asleep, entirely oblivious to the terrifying events unfolding. However, an overwhelming panic then seized me as I abruptly realized I did not possess a cell phone, and there were no cordless telephones available within the house. So, I seized the dresser and forcibly pushed it in front of the door, desperately hoping it would keep us secure and safe. It was at that moment that the exterior became completely dark, and I observed a shadow traversing the window. The knocking resumed, and I heard the woman's voice calling out, "Come on, dearie, I won't hurt you, please come out." The window was being struck with such force that I genuinely believed it might shatter. The children awoke and, understandably terrified, began to scream. Despite being physically strong for my age, the presence of the children made me feel profoundly vulnerable and frightened. Just then, I heard the father's distinctive shout, "Hey! Who the hell are you?" and the person immediately fled. The front door abruptly opened, followed by loud knocking on the children's bedroom door. I experienced immense relief upon seeing that it was the parents. After I allowed them inside and returned the dresser to its original position, I recounted every single detail of what had occurred to them. When the law enforcement officers arrived, they thoroughly searched the surrounding area but discovered no one. Nevertheless, they noticed that the bushes encircling the patio had been severely damaged and torn up, as if someone had forcibly pushed their way through them to gain closer proximity to the door. I babysat for them only one more time after that incident. However, approximately 5 months later, they relocated, and I subsequently never undertook babysitting duties for anyone ever again. Story 3. When I was approximately 17 years old, I resided in a small, close-knit village with a population of about 1,200 inhabitants. Annually, the village hosted a highly anticipated festival that everyone eagerly looked forward to. The adult members of the community would convene at the town hall for a shared dinner and a celebratory party. They would perform brief theatrical plays, exchange humorous anecdotes about the funny or significant occurrences of the preceding year, and everyone would share in hearty laughter together. This particular festival typically transpired in February, a time when the ground was characteristically covered in a blanket of snow, and darkness descended early in the evening. During the period of this festival, nearly all the girls ranging from approximately 13 to 17 years old were kept incredibly busy with babysitting responsibilities, largely because most parents attended the party. My 2 friends and I were unable to participate since the minimum age requirement was 18, so we devised an alternative plan. We drove around the village in my friend's car, offering rides to individuals heading to the town hall for the party. Given the complete absence of taxi services within the village, many people were pleased to compensate us a small sum for the ride. Moreover, it proved to be a clever and efficient method to earn some additional spending money. We had been driving around for several hours, and since we possessed knowledge of where everyone resided, some adults requested that we drive by their houses to verify that everything was in order. This practice, I believe, provided the parents with a bit more reassurance. I also suspect they wished to keep us occupied until the party concluded, so we could provide them with a return ride home later. In one of the village's older residential areas, the streetlights were noticeably dim, compelling us to drive slowly and cautiously. A mother whom we had driven earlier resided on this particular street. She was a single parent with 3 young children, aged approximately 2, 4, and 8 years old, if my memory serves correctly. Her 15-year-old niece was currently babysitting them. Anyway, it was around 10 p.m., and this specific locality was characterized by its surrounding hills and cliffs. As we slowly navigated through, my friend remarked that he observed something moving in her garden. We did not give it much thought at the time and jested that it was probably just a cat, so we continued driving to the other side of the village. However, my friend seated in the back declared that he felt a strong premonition of unease. He expressed a desire to return to the house and check for footprints in the snow. Upon our return, we parked the car and peered over the fence. Sure enough, there were fresh human footprints clearly visible in the snow. They were the size indicative of an older individual. We exchanged glances for a moment, then collectively decided to follow the trail. The footprints led directly past all the bedrooms, and near each window, they distinctly turned towards it, as if someone had been attempting to peer inside. Eventually, the trail terminated on the street, and we lost track of it because the snowplow had passed through earlier that night. We deliberated whether we should retrieve the mother from the party or simply ring the doorbell to ascertain if everything was satisfactory inside. Since none of the footprints led to either the back door or the front door, we resolved that two of us would remain in the neighborhood and monitor the house, while the driver proceeded to the police station and picked up the mother on the return journey. Approximately 5 minutes after the driver departed, we noticed someone concealed behind one of the garages, a few houses down the street. He remained completely motionless, simply seated there with a small camera clutched in his hand. Then, after a short while, he rose to his feet, meticulously surveyed his surroundings, and then began walking towards the house where the mother resided. He moved slowly, as if deliberately trying to avoid detection, and made his way to the rear of the house, directly towards the back door. We could barely distinguish his movements in the pervasive darkness, but we were absolutely certain he was not merely passing by. Without a moment's hesitation, my friend and I sprinted through the 2 gardens separating our position from the mother's house, endeavoring to intercept him before he could gain entry through the back door. We reached him just in time, precisely as he was attempting to force open the door. When we shouted at him to stop, he rapidly turned and fled. We gave chase. He sprinted down the street to create some distance between us, but we were both proficient runners, so we began to rapidly close the gap. This particular chase represented the most intense and adrenaline-fueled moment of our entire lives. I vividly recall feeling my heart pounding relentlessly, and my sole focus was on avoiding a slip or maintaining my running speed. The end of the street was rapidly approaching, and we could clearly discern the sharp 90-degree turn to the right ahead. I knew that if I remained on the street, I would be unable to keep pace with him, so I swiftly made a decisive choice to take a risk. Instead of decelerating, I leaped off the street onto the grassy and dirty terrain beside it, harboring the hope that I could reach the turn before he did. My intention was to position myself where I could obstruct him after he inevitably lost some speed while making the sharp turn. I pushed myself even harder, fully aware that this was my crucial opportunity to stop him. However, my plan did not come to fruition as he somehow managed to navigate the turn without significantly slowing down. I had expended too much energy running through the deep snow, and I realized I would have to reduce my speed. I was still approximately 10 meters behind him, but my friend was closer and gaining rapidly. When my friend recognized he could extend his foot and trip him, he executed the action. The individual fell, resulting in the quickest takedown I had ever witnessed. He struck his head forcefully on the frozen ground and was immediately rendered unconscious. My friend checked the individual's pockets and discovered a small, broken camera. Fortunately, the driver arrived a few minutes later with the mother, and the police soon followed. An ambulance then arrived and transported the individual away. We recounted every single detail of what had transpired to the police chief. When my friend casually mentioned tripping the individual, the chief ceased his typing and looked up at us. "Are you sure you tripped him?" he inquired. "The way I see it, you three heroes caught a burglar in the act, and while he was running away, he simply fell and hit his head." He then nodded slowly and offered us a small smile, as if in agreement with our version of events. Yet, whenever I reflect upon it, the entire situation truly unnerves me. This individual must have meticulously planned every aspect of his actions. He possessed knowledge of when the festival was scheduled, was aware that the mother was a single parent, leading him to specifically target her house, and knew the layout of everything. The entire incident felt far too calculated. This particular experience continues to make me feel profoundly uneasy whenever I contemplate it, and I remain uncertain about what genuinely transpired. I reside in an inherently safe area, which renders this experience even stranger, as it starkly illustrates that one can never be excessively certain of their safety. Story 4. My nephew was approximately 5 years old at that particular time. His parents had plans for the evening and requested that I babysit him. I was young myself, and this marked my very first occasion watching over a child entirely alone. I did not truly know what to do, so I decided to keep things straightforward and simple. I settled him in the living room with Netflix streaming on the television, believing this would keep him thoroughly entertained for a significant period. We navigated to the children's section on Netflix and selected a show featuring talking cars. It was around 5 p.m., so the sun was still visibly present outside. The couch was positioned near a sliding glass door, and the curtain on the door was wide open, affording us a clear and unobstructed view of the outdoors. I sat down with my nephew on the couch, and we began watching the show together. He was genuinely enjoying it and frequently laughed at some of the scenes. Observing how much he liked it, I decided to continue watching for a while. We continued to watch the show for a few hours until darkness finally enveloped the outside. I activated some of the indoor lights but inadvertently neglected to close the curtain. Because the curtain remained open, individuals outside could readily see into the room, but from inside, all I could perceive was the profound darkness of the night. My backyard borders a large open field, so there are no streetlights present out there. Then, suddenly and unexpectedly, I heard the distinctive sound of one of the deck chairs being dragged across the deck. I recognized the sound immediately and initially assumed it must be my parents returning home, but I did not truly pause to ponder why they would arrive quietly and then proceed to move deck chairs at night. It did not strike me as strange at the moment, given that we reside in a safe neighborhood. So, my nephew and I continued watching television for approximately another hour before it was time for bed. I switched off the television, prepared my nephew for sleep, and walked him to his room. On my way, I noticed that my parents were indeed home, and feeling a mild sense of curiosity, I inquired if they had been outside on the deck. They both asserted that they had not been out at all. I felt a sudden jolt of fear, so I went to the kitchen and activated the outdoor light. Peering through the window, I witnessed something that intensified my unease. One of the deck chairs, which is typically arranged around the outdoor table, had been moved. It was now situated approximately 5 to 10 feet away from its customary spot, directly in front of the sliding glass door. The chair was positioned to face the window, less than a foot away from the glass. It was peculiar because it appeared as though someone had carefully and deliberately moved it to that specific location. I could not comprehend why it was positioned so intimately close to the window, but then a shiver traversed my spine. The chair was precisely in front of the opening in the curtains. From where it was situated, anyone sitting in it would have possessed a perfectly clear view of both me and my nephew. The chair had been placed as if someone had simply pulled it up and taken a seat, making it feel as though we were the ones being observed. The following day, I discovered 2 large handprints on my bedroom window, with the fingers distinctly spread out. The prints were remarkably clear and appeared fresh, as if someone had pressed their hands firmly against the glass. My bedroom window was located on the first floor, and it seemed impossible for anyone to reach it from outside. Fortunately, the room had previously belonged to my brother, and he had encountered some difficulty in secretly bringing girls in. Because of that, my parents had installed exceptionally strong locks. They were so secure that the window could not be opened at all, regardless of how much effort one exerted. Several years have passed since that incident, and there have been no other indications of someone spying on me, but that night genuinely frightened me. Now, I invariably ensure to close all the curtains at night.
Bye.